to this week's edition of World Crisis Radio. This is Webster Tarpley speaking to you from a sweltering Washington, D.C. And, here in the nation's capital, the question of Syria remains front and center. We've got many things going on. We've got Egypt. We've got the struggle over the filibuster. We've got the bankruptcy of Detroit. We'll talk about that in just a second. Let's just try to do justice to Syria very briefly. We've got an interview later in the program with Randy Credico, running for mayor of New York City, now on the Democratic primary ballot, and he wants to share with us his plan to launch a new nationwide party starting from the city of New York. It's the Tax Wall Street Party, and he wants to make his campaign, the prolongation of his campaign beyond the Democratic primary, all the way to November, the main vehicle for that. But let's just look at Syria, first of all. The positive thing about Syria is another week has gone by, and there is no big war. The pressure of Skull and Bones Kerry, of McCain, of the British and the French and the Israelis and the neocons and all these people who want Obama to order the big bombing raid and the big land invasion, the answer is still no. Nothing is happening. Skull and Bones Kerry went to a refugee camp this week and was treated badly because they say, service is lousy. Where are our guns? We want the American taxpayer to cough up. The New York Times has an article in which they acknowledge that Assad is winning. And that's, I guess, once the New York Times acknowledges it, maybe it means that the war is going to end soon. I don't know. We can't be quite that sanguine, but that is the general idea, right? It's let's see how they put it here in the New York Times. July 17th, 2013, the New York Times has finally figured out, only 6 weeks after the fall of Qusair, that momentum shifts in Syria, bolstering Assad's position. Yes, the momentum has shifted, and Assad's position is bolstered. And we've gone through the various questions here. The money that Obama has requested, apparently, to arm the death squads is tied up, bottled up in the Congress, and the various people are fighting about it. And that includes McCain. Now, this is interesting, right? We know McCain is dominated by rage. He would be down there in the middle inferno among the rage balls, or maybe different ways, the violent, I guess he would be, the seventh circle. McCain was at a hearing. General Dempsey, Obama's tame general, General Dempsey wants to get confirmed by the Senate for a second 2-year term as the head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And McCain takes advantage of this to rough him up with a rage fit. So McCain asks him, Dempsey, what's worse, the damage that we will have if we don't do anything, or the damage that we will have if Assad is allowed to stay in power, or the risk of getting him out of power? And this was a real acrimonious, angry exchange, right, where McCain said, you've done nothing, and Dempsey said, no, it's not true, we haven't done anything. The details interest us less than the animus, right, the fact that they're fighting among themselves. This is just what we want. Nothing could be better. So let McCain fight Dempsey, insult him, let Dempsey get his back up, let him fight back in various ways that he has, and the result is the death squads are losing. There's even death squad fratricide, right? When one of the things now, even the TV news in the evening is signaling that since the Hamami assassination, since Hamami, the friend of Idris at the Free Syrian Army, since he was offed by the emir, the coastal emir of the Islamic Emirate of Iraq and the Levant, the death squads are fighting among themselves. Every death squad is now fighting on two fronts, against its rival death squads and against the Syrian army. And I think we can say this rebellion is doomed. And that's why it would have been a good thing for Obama and Putin to sit down and say, let's manage the wrapping up of this doomed rebellion. The other thing, of course, is that the CIA has tried to pull out Navalny in Moscow. He's just been sentenced to a stiff jail term. Was it enough? I don't know. I don't know the law. Interesting that the Russian commentator Markov of the Plekhanov University points out that this was an attempt by a shadowy group of international financiers pick Navalny as the vehicle for a color revolution on the Ukrainian or Georgian model to try to overthrow Putin. It hasn't worked. And we want to say from here, a weak Russia is disastrous. We saw under Medvedev when the Russia was weak and allowed the West to run wild, Libya was bombed, and the world situation took a very ominous turn. Now that Putin is back, there's a clear message: back off, you Western imperialists, and that's the message that we need. The only language that a degenerate like John Forbes Kerry understands is precisely that. Now, Detroit, bankrupt. Well, here's the problem now. Once you're bankrupt, you're in, I believe it's Chapter 9 bankruptcy. Here are the guidelines. All derivatives must be wiped out. No derivatives should be considered enforceable. All derivatives go to the delete button and the shredder. At the same time, the bondholders will take a bath. The bondholders need a haircut and a bath. They need to essentially renounce a very large portion. I would say about 90% of their bonds should be renounced. That will allow us to maintain the payments to the pensioners, the people who need old age pensions, health care pensions, and other contractual obligations, because all of those are contracts. Those are labor contracts with real people. And we've got to put people first. We've got to put the preservation of labor power and indeed of the general standards of civilization. Those things have to take precedence over the sanctity of debt. And don't let little Rand or Ron Paul or any Austrian tell you any different. And then how could Detroit finance itself? Well, thanks to Helicopter Ben. Again, all we need is one call from a real president to the Federal Reserve saying, Ben, I want to thank you for your willingness to put forward $500 billion as a special Detroit window. We have an AIG window. We have Maiden Lane 1, Maiden Lane 2. This is all AIG. How about a window for Detroit? Let's have a Detroit window, a credit stimulus, $500 billion or something of this magnitude to rebuild the city, to maintain the payments that represent civilization, to avoid selling off the Detroit Art Institute in the same way that poor Harrisburg just had an auction of the poor objects that they had assembled to try to attract some poor tourist business with a Wild West museum, right? They had a couple of pistols that belonged to General Custer, and those sold for $35,000 or $40,000. Now, let's not have the art treasures of Detroit sold off, right? I'm thinking of the Nazis in World War II looting art collections, stealing it, and taking it back. Goering, in particular, taking it back to his castle. No. So no cuts for people. Only bondholders. Derivatives wiped out. Bondholders take a bath. No cuts for people. And the future of Detroit is financed as a 0% century bond window, the special Detroit credit stimulus facility opened up by Helicopter Ben as a result of popular pressure and political pressure. That's the answer. Back in a minute. Welcome back to the World Crisis Radio. And it's the afternoon of July 19th. It's Friday, July 19th, and here we are in Washington, D.C., and, of course, we're sweltering. Now, we've just outlined the overall situation in the Middle East. Even the New York Times concedes Assad is winning, and that is the overarching reality. In the meantime, we look at somebody like Snowden and his guru, Glenn Greenwald, right? I guess there's a competition between little Lord Julian Assange, operating from his embassy digs, his pied-à-terre in central London, and Glenn Greenwald, another cosmopolitan, I guess, operating from Rio de Janeiro down there in Brazil. Who controls Snowden? Well, it looks like Glenn Greenwald controls the information flow. Can you imagine? Snowden claims to be a friend of transparency. He takes these materials from the NSA, fine, and he gives them to The Guardian and to the Washington Post. Barton Gellman of the Washington Post, and even worse, Greenwald of the left wing of British intelligence, the London Guardian. And they're deciding, those two, Gellman and Greenwald, decide what you get to know. Now, it's also clear that Putin is treating him like Typhoid Mary with good reason. Basically, it's a grudging concession. Look, we don't really want you here. We wish you hadn't come here. You're an unwanted Christmas gift for us. But if you insist, if you must, if you're going to embarrass me and put me on the spot, well, then you can stay. But make sure you shut your yap. No provocations, please. We know who you are. Don't try the provocations. Now, if you look at this, we're told, according to The Hill of today here in Washington, The Hill speculates that the Obama White House is signaling that they're going to call off the meeting with Putin that was scheduled for September, I believe it is. It's the G20, I think, and at the edge of the G20, there was going to be a special bilateral Putin meeting with Obama. Now, what we see, therefore, is the ability of Snowden and his guru, Glenn Greenwald, in the service of British intelligence to wreck the possibility of a convergence. And what would the convergence be, pray tell? Obama doesn't want the big war in Syria. He wants drones, assassinations, all that other stuff. We're not fools. We can see what he wants. But he doesn't want the 1,000 bombers, and he doesn't want the 5 infantry divisions. That would destroy him. He'd be impeached. Yeah, he would. And he'd be impeached all around. So Putin is also interested in saving the Assad regime and trying to get the death squads out of there. Wouldn't there be the potential for a convergence? And in the middle, up pops Snowden, the CIA provocateur. Now, pray tell, what global power has a track record of playing the United States against Russia for its own benefit? 3 guesses. UK, Britain, England, Perfide Albion, they're the ones. And they are, of course, the sponsors of Snowden. The Vichy French, of course, with Hollande and Fabius, the nostalgics of the occupation, the Pétainistes. Yeah, we have them. But then we have the Colonel Blimps, the British. So the British are getting good mileage out of their Snowden operation. What they started with their London Guardian. White House signals Obama may snub Putin. Who benefits from that? London. And who's going to suffer? Well, the Syrian people, because otherwise there's an obvious common interest of these two. Now,